Hi, my name is Leisha, and today I'm going to be talking to you about CrowdCheer, which is a project I've been working on for a couple of years now, and this idea of being able to crowdsource continual support within our communities via ad hoc crowds. So this whole project kind of started with this idea of imagining a world where we could crowdsource support from within our communities as we're working towards our goals at these opportune moments where we might have particular needs that are coming up, and there might be support that is available in that moment within our community. So you could imagine if you're a runner running your first 10K, there might be moments where spectators in the crowd might be able to provide support to you as you're running. Or maybe if you are leading your first research project in a research studio, there might be moments where your peers are able to help you out on your project, say for a study design, something they might have done before. So this idea of giving and receiving support in communities isn't really new. We know it's something that is really important for communities, and it means that community members can really support their own goals within the community as well as the needs of others in the community. And this kind of support really improves the efficacy of both those individual community members and the community as a whole. And in this work, I'm really interested in exploring this idea of continual support in communities. So thinking about these opportune moments and finding these opportune moments to really connect community needs to community resources. So while people in the community might be very willing and well-equipped to support the needs of other community members, they often have their own goals that they're tracking as well. So that means that they're not always available to support the needs of other people in the community on demand or as these needs arise. And these community members can still struggle with really connecting to the opportunities to seek or give help within a community because of the dynamic nature of the needs and the availability. So for example, a person's needs can arise one moment and eventually they'll dissolve. And a community member might have particular windows of availability where they might be able to help another person, but those windows are often temporary. So there's a real challenge in finding these opportune moments for people to provide support. So all this has kind of led us to this research question of how might we develop this dynamic understanding of both the changing needs within a community and the available resources to identify these opportune moments and connect community needs that are arising in the community to the members that are available to provide that support in the moment. And in particular, I'm really curious about the challenges of creating these connections and how technology can support that. So there's been a lot of work that has been done on connecting needs to resources within communities. And in particular, these approaches are really good for connecting needs to resources when you know the needs and the availability of resources in advance. So, for example, an expertise recommender, the needs are explicitly reported and logged in a help desk system. In peer research, people are reporting their needs explicitly in the system and also their availability. And connections are kind of created in the community based on this information. The challenge, though, is that these existing approaches are really using a static understanding of the needs and resources, where they have this kind of idea of this general availability, and the needs and resources are explicitly reported. But it breaks down for this goal of trying to connect needs to resources at opportune moments, where we have these streams of changing needs and available resources, which are very dynamic. And so we need approaches that really think about connecting needs to resources at these opportune moments over time in a community. And that requires a way to keep track of both the upcoming needs and the changing availability such that we could find the moments where they align. There's also been a lot of work in the space of real-time crowdsourcing that has thought about, okay, if we have these real-time needs, how do we meet them with on-demand crowds. And a lot of these existing approaches support this kind of like dynamic nature of tasks and are good for meeting real-time needs, but they do use paid on-demand crowds. And in these approaches, they kind of, because the crowds are paid, they can make the assumption that the crowd worker is available and generally available to complete tasks on demand. However, within communities, community members, like we mentioned before, have changing availability and might not always be available, and it's kind of they're conditionally available. And they're conditionally available because they have their own goals, so their availability is also dynamically changing. So we can't necessarily make the assumption that they will be generally available to complete tasks, which means that we need new models to kind of to represent their availability as it changes, such that we have a better understanding of when they could actually complete tasks for us on demand. And there have been approaches more recently in the physical crowdsourcing space around on-the-go crowdsourcing, which have been really successful for kind of balancing both community needs and individual needs of these volunteer crowds who might be available at opportune moments to kind of provide support for these global tasks, like being able to deliver a package en route to your location or something like that. And a lot of these approaches have thought about modeling availability based on a person's kind of roughly repeatable patterns and somewhat predictable routines, such that they could understand what the person's availability might be when the system is soliciting their support to complete a task. So in these prior settings, on-the-go crowds may be willing to support a community need as long as it's convenient, which can roughly be modeled by these predictable routines. However, in our setting, if we're thinking about these crowds within communities where they might still want to make progress on their own goals, the opportunities for them to provide that support are And so, as opposed to having these roughly repeatable routines, the opportunities for them to provide support are really conditionally convenient and kind of dependent on the changing tasks and goals that they might be experiencing within the community, and not just these repeatable routines that they're going through. And so, if we want to really support the identification of these opportune moments for people in the community to provide support, we need ways to model convenience based on their dynamic tasks and goals to really help them evaluate which support opportunities might be viable based on their actual availability to provide that support. And so we've talked about a lot of prior work that has thought about ways to connect needs to resources and communities, particularly workplace communities or research communities. Techniques for meeting needs on demand, but with paid crowds, and systems that really consider convenience when you're trying to make on-the-go community contributions with a volunteer crowd. However, these approaches, as we've mentioned before, can't currently address the dynamic challenges of being able to monitor opportunities across the community and supporting people in evaluating whether or not an opportunity might be viable for a community member in the moment, given that their availability is changing and dependent on their tasks and goals. And so we proposed this new approach that we call continual support via ad hoc crowds, which is a way of connecting needs to resources and communities at these opportune moments via ad hoc crowds, who are people who, while they're engaged in a primary activity within their community, are available and willing to provide support to others at these opportune moments. And as an illustrative example, we studied this challenge of connecting ad hoc crowds of spectators at races to opportune moments to cheer for other runners at the race, given that they're also supporting their own runner. And so just to characterize ad hoc crowds a little bit further and what we mean by that, there are these people within communities who are really willing and interested in supporting community needs. They often are very enthusiastic about supporting the needs within their community and very much consider that an objective alongside the other things they are trying to accomplish within their community. And oftentimes they have the expertise or the resources to support these community tasks. So because they are part of the community, they might have completed tasks that are similar in the past. They might have received support from others in their community and have experienced the benefits of that support in the past. So they're really well equipped to provide that support as a result. And finally, what really makes them stand out from other crowds that have been researched in crowdsourcing literature is that they have their own goals. And because they are trying to make progress on those goals and trying to accomplish their own tasks, they have this conditional availability where they're not always available, and it really is dependent on where they're at with their own goals. And so in the context of the race setting, we conducted several rounds of iterative testing at races and really tried to understand the experience of a spectator at a race when they are trying to support both their runner but also other runners while they're waiting at the race. And so we discovered kind of three core challenges that these spectators experience that we feel generalized to these ad hoc crowds, which I'll go through now. So first, these community members might not actually know about these opportune moments to provide support. And this is because the set of needs that a person can meet at any moment changes as the needs are changing. Because, as we said before, these needs will come and go in the moment. And similarly, the set of people that can support those needs also changes as the person's availability changes because they have their own goals, which affects their availability. So, for example, from our need finding, specifically with spectators, we learned that spectators actually don't really know about these opportune moments to provide this direct support and directly cheer for other runners in a similar way to how they might cheer for their own runners, where they're kind of doing something very personal, calling out their name, or saying a cheer that the runner might want to hear. A second challenge that we noticed that these ad hoc crowds face is that they struggle to really evaluate when they want to support an upcoming need because their availability is dependent on if they need to attend to their own goals at the moment. So specifically in the race setting, we learned that when spectators are presented with support opportunities at races, they're actually unwilling to cheer for other runners unless they're really confident that participating is not going to interfere with their ability to cheer for their friends and family. And finally, the third challenge that we observed was oftentimes these community members are actually underprepared or unprepared to support this upcoming need on demand because they lack the context to be able to do so in the moment. So for the example in the race setting, our need finding showed us that spectators really struggle to spot and cheer for runners that they don't know when the opportunity presents itself because they might not know what that person looks like or how to spot them in the crowd, how far away they are, when's the right moment to kind of look up and cheer, etc. And so we introduced CrowdCheer as a system and intervention to support spectators at races to really support their own runner, but also provide this continual support to other runners at the race. And so CrowdCheer is an iOS app that both runners and spectators install. And for a runner, it kind of tracks their run just like it would, like an app like Runkeeper or something like that, and it logs their run. But for the spectator, it helps with monitoring the status of runners, and also the availability of each spectator who has it installed. It helps match spectators to these opportune moments to cheer for other runners, given the status of their own runner, which you could kind of see in this dashboard here. It shows these opportunities below, but it also is going to give you the continual awareness of where your runner is throughout the race. And finally, it helps spectators by priming and cueing them so they can spot and directly cheer for these runners that they don't know at a race. And within CrowdCheer, we introduce this sideloading technique to really help spectators with this challenge of evaluating opportunities to cheer for other runners that are nearby, given the current status of their own runner. So sideloading is this interaction technique that literally sideloads in these opportunities to cheer for other runners that are nearby alongside the real-time status of their runner, such that the spectator can really know about the opportunities where they might be able to cheer and evaluate whether or not they want to volunteer support for another runner or attend to their runner at the moment. And this kind of takes two forms. So in the previous slide, you saw this dashboard where they could see their runners and they could see these other opportunities to cheer for people who are nearby. And once they have committed to a runner, say they decide to cheer for somebody else, they will always have the status of their primary runner sideloaded alongside the task of cheering for another person. So they are aware of the status of their runner as they are contributing to a support task. And if they happen to be cheering for somebody else, and in that moment their runner does approach, the system notifies them and lets them know that they might need to attend to cheering for their own runner in that moment. And finally, the third kind of like key interface characteristic that we have are these cues that help prime spectators with the information they need to cheer for a runner they might not know. And it provides information like the runner's name, their outfit, a picture in their outfit so they could identify that runner, a bib number, and a personal cheer so they could really provide this personalized support that the runner has requested explicitly. And so technically there are obstacles in being able to kind of identify these opportunities and connect people in the crowd, these spectators, to opportunities to provide support for other runners and to cheer for other runners when they have their own runners to be cheering for as well. And so, for example, these challenges that the ad hoc crowd of spectators face are that they're really unable to keep track of the different ways in which they can provide support because of this unpredictable nature of the tasks and of the different opportunities that they might be able to support. The ad hoc crowd of spectators also really need help in evaluating which of the support opportunities are ideal for them to complete, given the real-time status of their goals, which determines their availability. And without an understanding for them of what's ideal to complete in the moment, workers end up having to kind of manually negotiate their own availability as they come across these support opportunities, which can be really difficult to do when they're trying to keep track of their own runner, keep track of support opportunities, and understand their own availability all at the same time. And even once the worker has opted into a support interaction or an opportunity to cheer for a runner, they need to be able to readily respond to that support request and complete the task. And because of the real-time nature of the task, workers really struggle because they don't know the context of how, when, or where to provide support or to cheer for another runner, let alone know who to help once they're matched to an opportunity. So it might be hard to kind of like identify a person. And so with this work, we introduce a continual support framework as a technical contribution, which is an approach to continually monitoring these changing needs and the availability in the community and connecting needs to available resources at these opportune moments. So what this framework really does is it monitors the changing goals, needs, and available resources within a community. It systematically matches community members available to the support tasks that exist at these opportune moments when the changing availability aligns with ongoing needs. And it primes and cues these crowd workers with the context they need that enables these actionable support tasks, which really will end up reducing the friction of providing support on demand to other people in the community. And so we conducted an initial kind of exploratory pilot study with CrowdCheer to really understand how it might serve these goals we care about of being able to crowdsource support from within a community and support the needs of a community, given that we're trying to identify these opportune moments to really connect needs to resources. And so we conducted a study at a 10K race in a large metropolitan city. And we had 19 participants at the race itself, where we had 8 spectators and 11 runners. And of those participants, we had 5 spectators and 9 runners complete our post-surveys. And we conducted semi-structured interviews for 20 to 30 minutes with all 5 spectators and sampling of the runners, 3 of them. And so with this pilot study, we hypothesized that with CrowdCheer, spectators would be able to cheer for other runners in addition to their own, primarily through the following mechanisms. So we hypothesized that CrowdCheer would support a continuous awareness of these opportune moments to cheer for other runners because spectators can use CrowdCheer to monitor both the upcoming needs of approaching runners and their own availability based on the status of their runner. We also hypothesized that spectators will be able to make effective decisions to support other runners in the community while still supporting their runner, because sideloading presents these opportune moments to cheer for another runner versus cheering for their own runner. And finally, we hypothesized that spectators will be able to effectively support the runners they choose to cheer on because CrowdCheer prepares them to spot and cheer for the runner by priming them with the context they need to do so on demand. And so through the race, we have these initial findings, and we were able to see that spectators were able to cheer for other runners in addition to their own at the race. And in particular, there were 12 unique kind of connections between spectators and other runners that we were able to observe. And to provide some clarity, we don't, because of challenges with our data logs through the app, we don't have explicit counts on the number of times a spectator might have cheered for other runners, but we do have a unique count of the unique runners that a spectator recalled cheering for at the race. And so there were 12 of these connections. And of the 5 spectators, 4 of them, which were 80%, were able to cheer for other runners at the race. On average, these spectators cheered for 2.4 other runners in addition to their own. And in terms of distribution, we saw that these spectators were actually able to cheer for 7 of the 11 runners, which was over half of the runners who spectators were able to support. And so one of the key findings that we were able to see with our study was that spectators really valued knowing about these explicit opportunities to provide support to other runners. So in our post-survey measures, we included Likert scale questions where we asked our spectators if they enjoyed cheering for other runners in the app at the race. And spectators responded on average with a 5.6 out of 7. And this was just kind of to get a sense of what it was like for them to be cheering for other people in addition to their own runners. And through our post-survey and interview measures, we got some really interesting quotes from people where they said, meaning CrowdCheer, showed me people who are around and gave me the option to cheer for them as well. It was pretty cool. Another spectator said it was really cool to have the opportunity to support both her runner and other people. They could be on their own, and I'm an advocate. It's awesome that it was even an option. And in particular, we saw initially that spectators really valued these support opportunities, but in digging further in our interviews, we learned that it was actually because they recognized the impact that this support might have. We think because part of being an ad hoc crowd, they are part of the community, so they're very familiar with these tasks and what it means to really receive that support at a race. So one spectator said, "I don't know how difficult it is for a runner to stay in it, especially when it's so cold. For me, it was just, you got this. To see someone pump you up, it helps you. I thought about how it feels for other runners to cheer for me. They don't know me, but they're cheering me on, and it felt good. Those cheers make something hard easier. Talking to people, hearing their stories, you never know what someone's going through." Another spectator reflected and said, "So I have been in the past a runner, so I know even along the course, having people cheer for you, even if they don't know who you are, is very encouraging." So it was really interesting to see that spectators really valued having opportunities to use their time to provide support to other people in the community, and that CrowdCheer really helped them become aware of these opportunities in a way where they might not have been able to in the past. Now, our second core finding was really around supporting a spectator and kind of evaluating when might I be able to cheer for these other runners, given that I have my own runner to cheer for as well. And in our post-survey measures and our interviews, we found that spectators reported that seeing the status of their runner alongside these opportunities to cheer for others actually helped them in their decision-making process and deciding when to cheer for others versus their runner. And so in our post-surveys, we asked them Likert scale question where we said, when I cheered for other runners in the app, I was confident that my runner was far away, which we saw an overwhelming 6.4 of 7 in response, which was fantastic. And in particular, we kind of tried to dig in our interviews to really understand what was it that kind of led to these decisions to cheer for other runners. And one spectator said, if I was pulling out my phone to see where they were, I could see, they were like 2 miles, 1.5 miles out or whatever. So I knew that I didn't have to worry about missing them coming through. And so that gave me the opportunity to see other runners that were nearby and cheer for them. So these spectators were really able to narrate back to us how they used CrowdCheer to do this evaluation task of understanding, okay, this is where my runner is. This means that I have this opportunity and time to be cheering for other people while I'm waiting. Another spectator reported, so when she was referring to her runner, started getting close, I wasn't paying as much attention to other runners. Like if I saw them, there were a couple of faces that I recognized or remembered from the screen because I kept flipping back and forth between those profiles. My runners and someone else's. So I kind of had their face in my head. And so, I didn't completely ignore them because I knew they would be finishing around the same time. But I didn't pay as much attention when I saw that he was coming up. And so these quotes kind of start to get at the other half of the experience where there are moments where spectators in the crowd were not necessarily interested in providing support to other runners, and we tried to, through our post-survey and interview measures, we're really trying to get at, okay, in these moments where you decided not to cheer, what were the factors that might have contributed? And a lot of it had to do with a lot of it had to do with in these moments where they decided that they weren't going to cheer. It was either because they knew that they weren't idle, or they weren't really sure about whether they were idle or had the availability to cheer for another person in the app. Another spectator, spectator E, who was the one spectator who chose not to cheer for other runners, reflected, and she said, I was just trying to figure out what to do with them, the other runners in the app that she saw on the dashboard. Once I saw the pictures pop up, I didn't select to follow them. I was just focused on my runners, is all. And in particular with the fifth spectator, spectator E, she talked about how she, when she was recruited by her runners, it wasn't really clear to her the purpose of the app and how to use it. And because she wasn't quite sure what she was supposed to be doing with it, she just really used the app to focus and cheer on her own runner, because she was struggling to make sense of these other runners that she was seeing in the app, and she wasn't really sure about what the app was supposed to be helping her with, which was clear to the other spectators who were participating. And so because she didn't really know what those opportunities meant or what was going on, she really just wanted to focus on cheering for her own runner. Another one of our spectators talked about how she was helping her nephew watch for their mom and dad. And so in the moments where her sister was approaching and her brother-in-law, she was really focused on using the app to cheer for them, but in addition focused on this other task that she really cared about, which was helping her nephew spot and cheer for them. And so she said she spent extra time kind of helping her nephew as a result, and in those moments was not interested in supporting other runners. And our third core finding in terms of what really led people to cheer for other runners at the race was that CrowdCheer really helped spectators feel prepared to spot and cheer for other runners on demand, and that they could really easily do so while still supporting their own runner. So in our Likert scale questions, we asked spectators, we had them respond to the sentence, I had enough information to spot and cheer for other runners, to which spectators responded at a 6.2 out of 7 from disagree to agree. And in our post-survey measures, we saw spectators kind of citing the specific affordances or the features in the app that really helped them spot and cheer for runners. So spectator A said, I love seeing the distance he was away from me and the changing colors. I was like, okay, he's getting close. He's getting really close. It was like a push, like, hey, you need to start focusing on your runner. Another spectator said, I really like the accuracy of the app. We were in the right place for them to see us. Normally, you're just guessing. So she was kind of contrasting it to the typical experience of being able to cheer for other runners at a race. And even your own runner, and that normally you're just kind of guessing when your runner might be approaching. And there's a lot of just kind of watching the crowd and hoping that you're catching the right pace group, for example. Another spectator responded by saying it was pretty cool to be able to spot runners based on their description. And the same spectator said, when I saw her, I don't know, I think I just happened to glance down at the app and saw that she was close, and then I looked up, and a minute or so later I saw her, or I just recognized her. So a lot of these spectators were able to notice how the app helped them spot and cheer for runners in the moment that the runner might be going past. And um, so one thing that we really cared about in terms of the outcomes of this app was that um, the experience of being able to cheer for other runners was not really disruptive to their ability to cheer for their own runner, and that CrowdCheer could support spectators in completing both of these tasks, being able to cheer for their own runner primarily, but also being able to identify these opportune moments to cheer for other runners and what the interaction between those two might be. And so we asked spectators in a Likert scale question. Using the app, I knew approximately how far my runner was at all times, to which spectators responded to 6.2 of 7, which is great. It means that they, on average, reported that they really had continual awareness of where their runner was throughout the app. And similarly, we asked, the app did not disrupt me with other runners while I was cheering for my runner, to which spectators responded to 6.8 out of 7, which means that this, despite being able to support so many other runners, there weren't really times that spectators felt that CrowdCheer was really preventing them from cheering for their own runner or disrupting them with these other opportunities. And in the post-surveys and the interviews, spectators got into more detail about what it was like to kind of balance these two tasks alongside each other. And so spectator A said it wasn't difficult at all, it was rather easy, it was just faces to look for, in reference to cheering for other runners. Spectator B said it was super easy. If I remember correctly, the top half of had my runner and where she was, and then the bottom half had other runners. And so you know roughly how far away they were, and you could tap on them to see more. So, I mean, it was just super easy to use. Spectator A went into a little bit more detail in her interview, and she said, I clicked on one of the other names just to see how it worked in the app, and I was like, okay, my runner is less than a mile away from you. Do you still want to continue to cheer for this person? And I was like, and then she grinned in the interview, oh, that's pretty cool. I love the fact that it kept giving you these, okay, your person is coming close. Do you still want to keep cheering? Or so in this quote, a spectator recalled how the app would actually remind her if she was cheering for another person that, hey, your runner's actually approaching. Are you sure you want to be cheering for this other person right now? And recalled that as a particular instance of where CrowdCheer really helped make sure she struck a balance between, okay, I'm here to support my runner at this race, and that's my primary goal, but I'm also interested in supporting these other people. So in summary, with this exploratory study, we had these initial findings, and we found that spectators did use CrowdCheer to cheer for these other runners in addition to their own, because of the following mechanisms, which we talked about. So CrowdCheer really promoted the awareness of opportunities to cheer for these other runners at a given moment, and really identify these opportune moments for spectators. It supported spectators in really being able to make these decisions and weigh the trade-offs in cheering for another runner versus cheering for their runner in a given moment. And it prepared spectators to cheer for these other runners on the fly once they chose to kind of engage in this opportunity and cheer for another runner. And so kind of going back to this idea of continual support via these ad hoc crowds of spectators. These continual support systems like CrowdCheer show a lot of promise for overcoming these challenges and that ad hoc crowd workers face within communities of just knowing about the different support opportunities that they might be able to support at opportune moments, being able to evaluate these opportunities when considering their own goals and availability, and really being prepared to support the needs on demand. And altogether, being able to overcome these challenges means that continual support systems can enable an ad hoc crowd within a community that is capable of supporting community needs alongside their own goals. And by using continual support systems to kind of continuously model the changing needs and available resources in a community, we can better connect community needs to the ad hoc crowd of community members who are willing and available to volunteer their support at these opportune moments, increasing the support opportunities that an individual can engage in, and as a result, scaling support within the community using existing community resources, which is a really powerful outcome for communities. And yeah, thank you.